We read a lot in the Bible about the apostles, such, and we've got a lot of advantages. I mean, good night. I have a YouTube channel, and I love the 20 and 30 somethings because they'll say, "You ever looked at your analytics?" No. I don't know how many people listen or watch. I don't know all the countries. Then they'll do something, and I see there's people all around the world. But here's the thing: could I not be preaching to you right now, and somebody somewhere in this world could be watching the video I got on the internet? Okay, apostles didn't have that. They didn't have that. They didn't have any ability to record their messages. Isn't that true? They didn't have any. They didn't have a radio to put it out, any TV, anything like that. They didn't have the printed page like we have. Is that not true? And so we've got some advantages over what they had. But what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is three distinct disadvantages that we labor under that the apostles knew nothing about. In other words, with all the modern advantages that we have, there are three things that they had that we don't have. And the reason I say that is, as I told you, I don't believe in whining, okay? And this is not whining. This is a fact. It's kind of like sometimes I'll preach in places, and they don't have electricity. Usually Michigan, stinking backwoods. But anyway, but no, I go to a country, they or running water, hot water. I preach in New Guinea, and I have to have an interpreter. And it always bothers me because I'll go in there, I'll go up and I'll say, I got a New Guinea guy interpret for me. I'll say, "Hi, I'm glad to be here." And this guy's talking for 15 minutes. And he keeps going, and I don't think he's checking muscles. There's none there, okay? And I always got this fearful feeling he's saying, "Hey, let's eat the white guy." But one time I preached New Guinea, and not only did I have one tribe I preached to, but some people from another tribe came, so they had to have their interpreter. So I preach, then this guy says it in one language, then that guy says it in another language. Now, guys, you know how long I preach? And then it goes through two interpreters. It is so long, I'm still over there. And that's just realism, okay? And so what I'm going to talk to you about this evening is there are three distinct disadvantages that we labor under, even though we labor for the Lord, that the apostles knew nothing about. They knew nothing about. They had three advantages we do not have, and it's not whining, it's not excusing. It is just a fact. Okay, I want you to go, if you will, to 1 John, first epistle of John. I'm not preaching out of that. I just want to see if it's in your version. Sam finally came forward. It's good to see that. You can pray and cry if you'd like while I speak. Now, I got to tell you something. Ladies, forgive me, okay? There are some women words I don't really think, I don't like them. I don't like to use them, okay? I hate the word cute. That is a woman word, okay? You know when I really hate it? When I use it. Like, you ever look at a baby? How can you look at a baby and not say cute? Oh, man, that's cute. And I hate the word precious. Isn't that precious? I mean, come on, guys. Can you imagine a bunch of guys? Man, I got me a 10-point deer. Oh, that's precious. But if a guy said that, I'd get him, okay? He'd be on my den wall. But every time, there's a verse here, every time I read it, the only word that can describe how my heart feels about it is precious. Look at it, verse 1. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life. Let's pray. Father, I thank you now, God, for your goodness and your grace. Thank you, God, for loving us the way that you do. Lord God, I know that I am totally unlovable from a holy God. There's no rational reason why you would ever love me. And I can only assume that these people are as bad as I am. And here we are, God. You love us all. You died for every one of us. I feel bad for the folks that you died for, haven't trusted you as their personal Savior. God, they're missing so much. They're missing your love, not just heaven. God bless these folks because they came here tonight. And this is Saturday night. You know what some of these folks used to do on a Saturday night. And I know, God, there's folks in here. I'm one of them. If there's a day before we got saved, if somebody said you're going to be in church on a Saturday night, I'd probably punch them. But here we are. And it's so good, God. But God, these folks came for two reasons. From you, and they want something from your book. And I am the number one obstacle to them doing that. So God, they need you to get Sam Gipp out of their way, out of your way. Speak to the hearts of your people, God. Get Gipp aside, push him over on the side, and speak to your people, God. I pray that you said, you put the local church down here, that your people would be edified. So God, I pray that your people will be edified by what they hear tonight, and that then they, being edified, would leave here and live to your glory. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Let's read it again, because I love this verse. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life. You'll excuse me, I'm going to talk to you a bit about my dad. My dad was a big guy. My dad, he had a head like a pumpkin. And he had hands like catcher's mitts. He really did. He weighed 285 pounds. And if my dad hit you, you stayed hit. My dad never hit me, so I didn't know. I'm here. Okay. He didn't do this face. It's just old age and road miles. Okay. But my dad was a good guy. I was telling somebody the other day how my dad got a job. My dad got a job at the depths of the Great Depression. He was 22 years old. You guys are steel. This is steel country. Well, Massillon had 5 steel mills. And he was everywhere looking for a job, and no jobs to be there was no next step. Okay. But you see, here's a chain link fence, and there's some guys on the other side of it digging a ditch. And down where the gate was open, he saw a shovel leaning against the fence on the inside. And he said, son, I watched that shovel for 20 minutes. He figured somebody was using it, set it there, and they're going to come right back. And he said, after 20 minutes, it was up for grabs. And he said, I stepped inside, picked that shovel up, got on the end of the ditch. He said, I didn't even ask them why they were digging it. I got nothing to do. They need a ditch dug. They got a shovel here. And he just started digging this ditch. He said, within a half an hour, some guy came by with a clipboard and a pencil, wrote my name down. And he said, I was now employed by Republic Steel. 43 years. He retired as the foreman of Enduro 3. My dad was a tough guy. He really was. Now, he was not a drinker. My dad would have a social drink. I'm not into social drinking. I don't justify it, but like my dad might have a beer. I don't know if he had 2 in a day. I never saw him drunk. He did not smoke. Now, my dad cussed. I mean, my dad cussed like the Navy sending recruits for language school. That's how my dad cussed. And he was not a boisterous man. I remember this happened. Now, you guys remember when Halloween was actually an innocent kids' holiday? You could send your kids, they were dressed up like cowboys or Indians, because you could do that then. It wasn't all, blood-sucking vampires, and you didn't have to worry about getting razor blades or being carried off. I mean, it was just an innocent holiday. And I remember Halloween was there, and it must have been a balmy October, because they had, we had a jack-o'-lantern, pumpkin all hollowed out on the porch, and the main big door, like this one, was open, and the screen door, so my dad could see everybody come up, and he's watching the TV, and here's the door, and I don't know if peripheral vision, I don't know if he heard something, but there was some 16-year-old kid, and he thought the call of God on his life was to bust as many pumpkins as he could that night, and whatever it was, my dad heard something, and he turns to see this kid stand here like this with a pumpkin, and their eyes met. And that boy had a decision of life to make, and he made the wrong decision. And he thought, I'll smash this pumpkin, get away from this old man. Buddy, he slammed that pumpkin down. I saw 285 pounds go 0 to 60 in 1.3 seconds. I mean, my dad was up, made a left turn, hit that screen door, caught the kid in the next yard. We all ran after him. So watch him beat him up. Oh, no. We didn't want to hit him, because he'd put him through the ground. I mean, he had him down on the ground. He was locked and loaded. He was going to put this fist right through his head. We're all going, Dad, don't kill him. Let us. But that was my dad. My dad was a good man. He really was. He's a hard worker. I watched my dad work, and I learned to work. My dad loved my mom. I watched how my dad loved my mom. I learned to love my wife. My dad was a good man, okay? Now, you know something about my dad, right? You know some things about my dad? Now, he's with the Lord, but if he wasn't, if he walked in that door, you know what would you do? You'd say, who's that guy? Because you don't know what he looked like. I'd say, that's my dad. If we were in a crowd and I heard his voice behind me, it wouldn't turn your head, would it? It would have turned my head. I remember one time when I was a little kid, I was downtown with him, and we came out of this store, and like we're dead halfway between two traffic lights, and we're parked across the street. Now, you know where my dad crossed the street? Wherever he wanted to. And we're from Romanian background, and in Romanian, the word for hand is mână, okay? And is the. I remember, I'm just a little kid. He never even looked at me. He's looking at the car, no traffic coming, and he drops this big old ham. Whoop. He goes, the mână, the hand. I put my hand in his hand, and it was kind of like this. I mean, he wrapped that hand about 3 times around my little hand. I levitated. And that was my first taste of immortality. And I knew when I stepped off that curb, brother, cars, trucks, and light flying planes would bounce off my dad. I was a good man. But you have never felt what it is like to hold his hand. And you have never heard him. And you have never seen him. Didn't they? Man, they did. Well, I'll tell you something. If you ever saw Jesus Christ, you'd remember. If you ever heard him, you know, doesn't the Bible say, you know it, if everything he did was written down, the world couldn't contain the books? So isn't there a lot that's off the record? Now, I was talking about guys, you know, I was on Ed. Ed's a fisherman. And I told you I'm not. It's war murder, okay, when I do this. But you know what about fishing, it ain't even catching the fish that I think would be the coolest thing. It's when I've talked to guys and they'll say, well, we went out and we caught breakfast. They went out and caught fish and then brought them in. They ain't taking them home. There's no trophy here. They just brought in breakfast and cooked it right there. You think there were times when the Lord and the apostles just got on the side of a lake and they caught them breakfast? Could you imagine what it must have been like for these guys to get together and say, remember that time we were down by the Sea of Galilee and we just caught breakfast? And you remember we're sitting around the fire and he started talking about home, how much he missed his father. They would never forget the sound of his voice. They would never forget what he looked like. This is the man right here, John, who pillowed his head on the bosom of Jesus Christ. Think about this, guys. He was listening to the heartbeat of the universe, was he not? If you heard the beat of the heart of God himself, would you ever forget it? No. And we read in this book in the New Testament that some of those guys got murdered. That'd be bad news. You know, I'm getting the age, boy, there's a bunch of guys are dying. A bunch of my friends are dying. And it's a shock when somebody dies. But you know, if they ever thought about quitting, they'd say, man, I remember what his voice was like. I can't quit. I remember when he said, go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the othermost part of Europe. He never put an expiration date on the Great Commission. Guys, we just got to keep going. What if they kill us? Then they kill us. But we can't stop. It isn't even like, I'll show them, I'll keep going. It was like, we can't quit because I've seen him and I've heard him and I've touched him. You've never seen him. You've never heard him. You've never touched him. But well, I'll bet if you did, that'd keep you going a long way down the road when everything else would want to stop you. I want to look at something else. I want to go to Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. Now, you guys understand that they call us a lot of things. They got all kinds of names for us. You know, we're nuts and Bible thumpers and religious fanatics. And is this not how the world, they represent us, they picture us? When they want to show a Bible believer, it's always some old white-haired, long-haired man with a white beard, with a robe, carrying a sign that says, world will end tomorrow. There is not one person in this room believes the world could end tomorrow. I mean, don't you believe this, that there's at least 1,007 more years? Yeah. So if you see somebody walking around white-haired, long-haired, white-bearded man in a white robe. He's carrying a sign that says world will end tomorrow. That ain't us. That's a Democrat. That world has ended so many times for them guys, they don't know what to do. If you see an old man with a white beard and white robe, and he's got a sign that says world will end in 1,007 years, that was one of us, okay? So they call us all kinds of things, but boy, they nailed one. They nailed one. I had a guy, I'll never forget, someplace, and this guy says, I was talking to some preacher, yeah? He didn't like you. Okay. He said, you want to know why? I said, well, he said, well, he don't like your stand on the book. I said, well, good. I mean, if he thinks I'm a fanatic about the book, that's a good thing. I'm sure there's people that don't like your preacher because he believes King James Bible. Well, man, I'm for that. You remember when they called us deplorables and we all just embraced it? Well, look what they said. Acts chapter 17, and look at verse 7. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, these that have turned the world upside down are come hither. Guys, that was not an exaggeration. That was not an overstatement. Christianity was absolutely taking the world system and putting it on its head. At this time, you know what people were? I told you the other night, they were polytheistic. They had all kinds of gods. I think the Romans had something like 200 or 300 different gods. And you know what they do? They would, you ever talk guys, and like there's a Chevy guy and a Ford guy, and then a Mopar guy's been hit in the head too many times. And like if the Chevy guy has trouble, the Ford guy will say, well, I told you not to buy a Chevy. You should have bought a Ford. That's how the Romans were about their gods. Some guy'd have some bad times. A guy'd say, I told you them gods you're worshiping aren't doing you any good. Since I've been worshiping my gods, man, that's what you need. You ought to try my gods. That's what they would do. And they had witchcraft, did they not? And so think about this. The disciples, this is a city limit, and the disciples would enter the city here preaching Jesus Christ. By the time they went out the other side, the statues were broken. They were burning the witchcraft books. People were trusting Jesus Christ. They were going to churches like this. Is that not true? That is the world upside down, guys. They were turning the world upside down. You never have, and I'll prophesy, you never will see 3,000 people saved in a day. But if you ever saw 3,000 people saved, no matter what happened next week, you just go, yeah, do you know what happened last week? And then somebody said, that's nothing. We had 5,000 saved. Brother, they were turning the world upside down. That ain't happening with us. It's not happening. I mean, brother, if you were coming in one city, inside the city and going out, and suddenly it had turned to Jesus Christ, and there were New Testament churches all over that city because you were there, and you saw 3,000 saved, and you saw 5,000 saved, and then again, you heard they killed Stephen. You know what you'd say? Yeah, man, but look what we're doing for God. Would that not be good for morale? I'm sorry. I believe in duty, okay? That duty means you go do it if you don't feel like it. But it sure is nice to have a little shot in the arm. Sure is nice to have a victory. Isn't that true? Now, guys, did you not spend the same 4 years I did in the same country? Last 4 years? Am I the only one in the last 4 years watching what was happening to our country? And I'd say to my wife, these people are turning our country upside down. They were scriptural. They were scriptural. They were calling good evil and evil good. Is that not true? I'd go from church to church, and the two words that described our congregations were frustrated, and there's another good word somewhere out there. Actually, one word. I was only thinking of one word. I actually wasn't thinking. I was fooling you about that. Oh, depressed. People were depressed. People were depressed and frustrated. That's how they felt. Guys, if we were seeing what they saw, you couldn't find a Democrat to get you upset. You guys are Pennsylvania, I'm from Ohio, pretty much the same, except that we won. And now we live in Idaho. Okay, I was telling the guys, the highest peak this side of Mississippi is 2,600 feet. We live in the bottom of a valley at 3,000 feet. We're called high desert, and we're surrounded by mountains. We get 12 inches of water a year. That is it. And every tree, if you go, it's funny, Boise is called the tree city. There wasn't no trees there. It's a prairie. They were all planted. Now they might cross-pollinate now, but they weren't. And not this time. I flew into Pittsburgh last Saturday, but I flew in here for something else not long ago, and we've been over there 8 years. Now I've flown in Pittsburgh. I've seen the view coming into Pittsburgh 1,000 times, but it's the first time I noticed the hills being carpeted with trees. You don't see that out west. It's just not like that. And out there, I had this happen. And I'm still not sure this guy believed me. Out there, everything is irrigated. If you got a tree, it's got water hitting it, because I'm telling you, it ain't coming natural. And they got all kinds of irrigation. We have a house now, and it has pop-up irrigation. And that is, the irrigation comes on, and the water pressure pops up these heads, and they spray, and they go down. And when the winter comes, you've got to blow those lines out so they don't freeze up and break. Well, I never did that, man. And so this older guy in the church, I said, Rock, I said, could you come out and blow the lines out of my irrigation and show me how to do it? And I'm not sure he didn't think it was like Tom Sawyer painting a fence. I think he thought I was just trying to get out of a job. So he does this, and he says, so tell me, how did you do this in Ohio? I said, brother, in Ohio, the irrigation come down from the sky. And I'm serious. This guy born and raised there. And he looked at me like he didn't believe it. And I'm still not sure he believes what I told him next. I said, Rocky, in Ohio, the farmers don't even irrigate. Yeah, he could not understand what that was like. But you got that irrigation. Everything's irrigated. You got if you fly over the west, and if it's clear, you don't have any clouds, you'll see the brown, and you'll see the prairie and the desert, and then you'll see little green circles. You've heard of crop circles. Well, that's the real thing. They got pivot irrigation, and right dead center of that, you got a stanchion that pumps water, and then they got sections maybe 20 feet long with a couple of tractor tires, and that thing will do a 360. It goes round in a circle, and you can tell it's pivot because it's a perfect circle. Now, sometimes you'll see it's a perfect square. How are they getting into the corners? That's wheel irrigation. And that is, you got a big steel wheel and about 5 feet, 6 feet of pipe out each side of it, and they connect them, and they work from the ends into the center. And in the center, you got a 4-wheel trolley with a motor, and that thing they'll get it where it goes to the edge of the field, and maybe 20 feet out that way. They'll leave it for about 4 hours. Then they'll shut it all down, start that motor. They'll run it 40 feet out, so it's got 20 feet dry behind it, 20 feet ahead. They'll run it, and they can get into the corners. They've got pivot irrigation. They have got what do I call it? Flood. Well, no, they got siphon irrigation. Siphon irrigation is where you'll have a ditch out by the road that's full of water, and you got an embankment, and all the crops are a little high. And you ever seen electric conduit? Okay, they'll make a J out of electric conduit, and they'll push it under the water so it's full of water. Then they'll take the long end and they'll drape it over the embankment, and it'll start, as the water runs out, it'll start sucking water out of that thing, and it'll fill all the water up between those rows. And they got flood irrigation, and they can do this for a house. I know guys that do it for the house, but a lot of farmers do it. And what they do is they put an embankment, a little bit of a dike, all the way around the field, so it's kind of like a tub. And they'll literally open up a water gate, and they will put about 6 or 7 inches of water on top of that whole field. Then they'll shut it off. And then over the next few days, that water will finally seep down in there. It's all kinds of irrigation. Let me tell you what I used to think about our country. I used to think that our country was like flood irrigation of the Bible. Like the Bible, our country was just submerged in Scripture. I was Roman Catholic, guys. There's no Bible in our home. You know where I heard the Bible? Public school. I remember going to elementary school and junior high school, and I remember hearing them, they prayed what they call the Lord's Prayer. It's a disciples' prayer, but they prayed the Lord's Prayer, and they'd read some portion of Scripture. I believe this. Guys, this book is supernatural. And that's why when you talk to somebody, you quote that book. Because what you're doing is you are booby trapping them spiritually. Because once this goes in, God can pull it up anytime he wants. And I believe when there was no, I never went to a Baptist church, never went to a Catholic, all I ever went to was Catholic church. And we didn't hear the gospel, we didn't hear the Bible, but in my homeroom, I heard that book read, and I think that was some seed that fell in there, okay? And so this country, I've always thought it was kind of like, it was just like under 6 inches of Bible. I don't think that anymore. You know what I think? I gave up on the NFL when they started, bowing their knee at the national anthem. But one of the coolest things, I don't know if they did it at pro games, but I think they did it at college games. Do you remember the wave? You remember, like, everybody in one line, they'd all stand up, do this, and as they sat down, the next guys would. I just thought that was cool to watch that thing ripple all the way around the stadium. I thought that's cool. I think that's how the gospel came. It came to our East Coast. It started in New England. And I want you to know something, guys. New England, spiritually, is the deadest part of this country. I've never seen a deader part. I preached for one of my graduates. This guy was in Maine. He was above Bangor. It wasn't at the end of the world, but you could see where the water went over from there. And when he took this church, the church was 150 years old. It's on the National Register of Historic Buildings. When he took the church, his youngest member was 65 years old. That was his kid's Sunday school. And you know how somebody will sit there and they'll go, I get this a lot. I'll be sitting in a pew and a woman will come up and go, "You're sitting in my pew." And I say, "Well, thank you. Show me where you park. I'll park there tomorrow." But over there, they had them pews that were boxed in with a door and had a brass plaque. And if it was the Smith family, they bought that pew. It was their property. And that was when I was doing Sunday through Friday meetings. And let me show you what a Mainer looks like when they're mad. Now, here's how they look when they're excited. Here's how they look when they're sad. I think that's how they look when they're dead, okay? I could go out there and take a pulse. I got a few watches. And I told Kathy about Wednesday, I figured it out. And I said, "I think I know why I'm here." He said, "Why?" She said, "Why?" I said, "I think I'm shocked there." I said, "I think he said, this place is so dead, I'm going to bring Gip in, and if that don't get it going, I'm out of here." I said, "I'll bet you within 6 months of this meeting being over, he's going in 3 months." But this was the craziest thing. These people, that's how they sat. I'm talking about every service, it was like this. And Friday night, he says, "We had a good meeting." I said, "How could you?" Yeah, like, how could you tell? And here's what he said tonight, Friday night. He said, "Tonight, Mrs. So-and-so," some 78-year-old lady. He said, "Tonight, Mrs. So-and-so laughed out loud." I said, "Yeah, but they beat her to death with a codfish." I mean, can you imagine that being your entire spiritual movement for 6 days of preaching? They're dead. And I think what's happened is that you just watch that like the wave. The gospel came in here and it's gone across this country. And you know how I feel? I feel like I'm standing about ankle deep in the Pacific Ocean with the country behind me, watching the Holy Spirit leave our country. They didn't know what that was like. Now they're turning the world upside down for God. Behind them, if they were like that, if they went across Europe and ended up over the far by Portugal and Spain and had their ankle deep in the Atlantic, you know what was behind them? Revival. Fires burning satanic books and statues being thrown away. Man, the statue makers were gone broke. The religious people were gone broke, weren't they? And 500 saved here and 1,000 here. I mean, guys, could you imagine what it must have been like? You have never experienced anything like that. You never will. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm telling you, we never saw it, and you're not going to see it now. Man, we get excited if one person gets saved. It's like a revival. So that's a disadvantage. I'll tell you one more. I want you to go to 2 Timothy. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, now, you know, when you think of the Apostle Paul, you probably think of him as our disciple, our apostle. He was. He's the guy that he gave us our New Testament church polity. We get our doctrine from him. We think of him as the apostle of the Gentiles. We think of him as an inspired writer. We think of him as our teacher for the stuff, how we do our churches. Is that not true? You don't forget. He was a prophet. We never think of Paul the prophet. I bet you said the apostle Paul, but I bet you never say the prophet Paul. But he's a prophet. Isn't prophecy, if I tell you this is good, it's not happening now, but someday something's going to happen? That's basically prophecy, right? Look what he said, and this is when he's closing out. This is the last book he wrote. This is last message to the church. Look what it says in chapter 4. I charge thee, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead. Now, you have to visit Texas to understand what the quick and the dead means. Because in Texas, you're either quit or you're dead. Who judge the quick and the dead at his appearing, and his kingdom, preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Now watch this. For the time will come. Wait a minute. With those words, is he not telling you what I'm about to say is not happening now, but one of these days it's going to happen? For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. Who the they is? That's us. That's not somebody outside this building. That's you and me. When they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fable. I want you to know, you are living in the age when that prophecy is being fulfilled. We are in the age when they will not endure sound doctrine. You know what amazes me, and it stuns people like you. Maybe it's happened here. I don't know. Man, you got a good family that comes up, and when the kid turns 18 or 19, they head up for contemporary church. And they just leave it all behind. And, you know, the age of the internet, I can leave my family and then go on the internet and rail on them in the name of God. I mean, they tell about, well, my dad was, oh, here's the word, my toxic parents. And they made me go to church, and, you know, they had all these standards, and they were this and they were that. Boy, I'm so glad I'm free. I love this thing. Have you heard about recovering fundamentalists? That's what they call themselves. I thought, I don't think they're recovering so well. I mean, they seem a little bitter to me. I don't feel near as upset as they are. So if they're recovering, I don't think I'm going to recover. But we're in the age when they don't want to endure sound doctrine. You say, well, that's not us. Oh, come on. Look, I know what you believe. I know everything you believe. But then you hear about somebody you like, and they die. Hey, come on, why don't you be honest? I'm going to be very honest with you. If I could do it, every military veteran, except maybe Millie, would go to heaven. Say why? Nothing breaks my heart when I see a jacket, an old man like this, and it's got a map of Vietnam. It'll say, I'm going to heaven when I die because I spent my time in hell. I've never been to war. And I can imagine it can be bad. I had a young man in my church. He was over in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they hit him with an RPG, tore his legs all up, but his buddy right next to him died in his arms. Hey guys, that's rough. And then say, well, you did a great thing, but you're going to hell. They still got to trust Christ, don't they? And we go, well, don't you think? No, I don't think. Well, you know, I've heard Christians say this. You know, my grandmother, she's 81 years old, and she wouldn't hurt a fly. She wouldn't hurt a fly because she's 81 years old. Tell you what, if you got a really, yeah, your 81-year-old grandmother's not godly, she's tired. And you take that 8 and 1 and turn it around and follow her around for about one Saturday night when she was 18 years old, you know exactly why she ought to be in hell. But we don't want to hear sound doctrine. You know, people say, well, I don't like doctrine because doctrine divides. Doctrine's supposed to divide. You want more people? Get that name Baptist off this church. More people come through that door, but you won't like who they are. I had a preacher out west, a Bible believer, and he said, I'm going to take Baptist off the name of my church. And they usually take it off for one or two reasons. They say they're tired of fighting over the name Baptist. And I tell them this, and I had a guy say that. He said, I'm tired of fighting over the name Baptist. I said, no, you're not. I said, you're tired of fighting. Guys, you can get tired of fighting. I don't know if you understand this, but you know, our military, they can be engaged with the enemy in mortal combat. That is not a game. I mean, they can be fighting somebody for 2 weeks. I mean, haven't slept for 3 days. And all of a sudden, some guy in a fresh uniform taps him on the shoulder and says, pull back, we're taking over the line now. You guys are going to Paris for 2 weeks for R&R. In the middle of mortal combat, they get 2 weeks off. If you get tired of fighting, I'm not going to call you a coward. I'm not going to say anything bad about you. Let me tell you what you do. Go away. Go away. I didn't say go to Vegas. I didn't say gamble. I didn't say go drink. But just go away. You know, I get these people all the time, and I know they mean well, but they're so... Anyway, they'll say, hey, when you get some time off, come by and see me. And I said, when I get time off, I don't want to see you. I said, you're some think they got to pay me to come and see you? I have people say this, you know, we get some time off. Here's what you need to do. I said, you understand, my whole life is to do. I just sent some stuff on the next book to my graphics guy. I'm waiting to get the cover back. I've been working the last 2 days on another book, just finishing it up. And I got 4 classes to teach next week. I'm always doing something. I said, when my wife and I go away, we work toward boring. We go and watch grass grow. We watch paint dry, cars rust, you know, all that exciting stuff. If we got like 5 days off, if like 3 days in, we go, I'm bored. Yes, we made it, you know. Guys, if you get tired of fighting, don't leave church. Just go away. Those guys in that fight, I mean, some of them are shell shocked, and they go, you know what I think they made a mistake starting with Vietnam? In World War II, you'd have guys in that combat, like in Pacific, maybe in Europe, they'd send them to France for a couple of weeks after it was liberated. In the Pacific, they'd send them to Guam, or they'd send them to Hawaii. And you know what they'd let them? They'd let them reacclimate for 2 weeks. They let them be reintroduced to civilization, but nobody they knew. And then after about 2 weeks, then they take them home. You can have a guy literally killing an enemy with his bare hands, and tomorrow he's back home. That's why these guys are half nuts. I mean, could you imagine if you're sitting here right now, and 2 days ago, you strangle a man to death because you're trying to kill you in Mortal Kombat? You'd be sitting here going, these guys don't know what's going on. You understand? I think we ought to get them someplace. I know we can fly them back home in a day. I think we ought to let them just someplace, put them someplace, and let them unwind. Let them reacclimate, then bring them home. But if you get tired of fighting, go away, take a week off, get rested, then come back home and rip somebody's face off. I knew a preacher, and he said, this good guy. He said, I'm taking Baptist off the name of my church. I said, why? He said, I'm tired of fighting over the name Baptist. No. There was a missionary in that same church, him and I, we both left. And the missionary said, well, I'm leaving. He said, why? We're still a Baptist church. We're still going to baptize and everything. He said, because I believe this is the beginning of a road. And you think this is all you're going to do, and you don't know what's farther down the road. Well, that guy was prophetic. He got tired of fighting over Baptist, so he took Baptist off of me. Then he got tired of fighting over good music. He got rid of that. Then he got tired of fighting over kind of standards. He got tired of fighting over the King James Bible. That church today is contemporary, and he is out of the ministry, which is really good. I don't mean that in a bad way. He needs to be out of the ministry. The other reason they take Baptists off is they say, I'll get more people to come in. And so this preacher, you know, he said, I'm going to take Baptists off the name. And I said, why? He said, I'll get more visitors. Well, at that time, I already had a meeting scheduled with him a year down the road. I just saw him at a meeting, you know. And so a year later, I'm in his church. And I said, how's that taking Baptists off the name of the church going for you? He said, brother, He said, I took the name Baptist off this church a year ago, and he said, I've had more visitors in the last year than in all the years I've been pastor. I said, really? He says, yeah, but he said, they don't stay. He said, as soon as they find out we're not charismatic, they just go out the other door. I said, maybe I ought to put Baptist back on. He did. We get this thing, preacher, I wish you wouldn't say so much about the King James Bible. It drives people away. You may not know this. I know you'd probably like to fill up these empty pews, but that name Baptist is keeping some folks out of here. That stand on the King James Bible, buddy, is keeping some people away from you that you want kept away. Do you understand? And we get this thing where, well, let's just not talk about doctrine. Doctrine is supposed to divide. It is supposed to separate us from people who don't believe like we do. I didn't say they're all evil. Some of them are saved. They believe I've met some people who believe the King James Bible, but I wouldn't preach in their church. They don't have the right doctrine. I'm not a Baptist writer, guys, but I'm a Baptist. I believe we're right about salvation. I believe we're right about eternal security. I believe we're right about getting baptized after you get saved. I believe we're right about independent churches. I am Baptist because I think they're right. And that's not proud. I mean, ask somebody's Church of Christ. Why are you Church of Christ? Because I think they're wrong. Yeah, I'm right about everything else. I decided to be wrong about my soul. Anybody that's got a religious tag on them, they are whatever they are because they think they're right. And I think we're right. But guys, they don't hear sound doctrine anymore. They will not endure sound doctrine. And man, these guys were getting saved and they were sucking up that doctrine like a tree that hadn't had water in 2 weeks. Isn't that true? So think about this, guys. They had seen him. You've never seen him. They've heard him. You never heard him. They'd touched him. You never touched him. Man, they had that to keep them going. They had the fact that they looked behind them, and in the wake of their ministry, they saw thousands getting saved. They saw churches springing up. They saw false gods being destroyed. They saw witchcraft being abandoned. You're not seeing that. You're not going to see it. I'm sorry, but you're not going to see it. And they had a crowd that was glad to hear every word preached, brother. They wanted they were sucking it up. And now we got, well, yeah, I don't go to church anymore. They're the only ones that are right. No, but there's a few that are right. And they might be the only church in your area that's like that. Okay. So what do you do, guys? I'm not trying to bum you out. All right. But we have those distinct disadvantages. So what do you do? The guy that wrote this told us, I want you to go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Before we read there, I want you to go to Matthew chapter 28. In Matthew chapter 28, it's a very familiar passage. It's what I call last minute instructions before the Lord leaves. And look what it says in verse 18. And Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Is there verse 21 that says, but there's an expiration date? Does he say do this until people don't endure sound doctrine anymore? Until there's a generation that's never heard me or seen me or touched me? There's no expiration date on this Great Commission. He says in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, he said, I want you to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost part of the earth. He doesn't say until. He doesn't say you got to do this until you get to the 21st century. There's no end date on what God told us to do. It's just not as exciting to do it. I mean, really, it didn't. I got saved in 1970. Brother, there was a spiritual movement in this country in that decade right there, 70 to 80. I don't say it was a national revival, but I've talked to so many guys And if you lived through the 70s, brother, there was something going on in this country. It ain't happening now. So here's what the Apostle Paul said. Go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It's a long chapter. And I'm going to be nice to you. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read the first 56 verses. No, look at the very last verse. And I hope you could imagine hearing him say these words to you right now. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. That's all you got to do, guys. You know what labor in vain is? I like the military stuff. There were 10 flying B-17s. One of them got wrecked a few years ago. There was one flying B-29, and it wasn't even a legitimate plane. It was literally pieced together. It's called Fifi Baby, and it was literally pieced together from a bunch of B-29 parts. And then they got another one. So now there are 2 flying B-29. They're very rare. Parts are gone. Well, there was a B-29 in 1950 that had to crash land, I think it was either Greenland or Iceland, on a frozen lake in winter. So this thing, it landed on the frozen lake, and they taxied it up onto the beach. And then they were rescued. Well, man, you're not getting that plane out of there. So it sat there for 50 years. And these guys said, hey, I think we can fly this out of here. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, we'll repair it, wait till winter, and use the ice for an airstrip and take off. So these guys started like early spring. I know that they had to put 4 engines on it, 4 brand new engines. Those are hard to find, twin Wasp. They spent millions of dollars, and they worked this thing, and they even flew in a small bulldozer that would bulldoze the snow off of the ice. And so, like, they put in like 4 or 5 months of work and millions of dollars in this B-29. And now the day comes. It's a day like today, winter, but was it not a beautiful day? Well, it's kind of a balmy, clear day, and they've got the runway, the ice runway plowed clean. They've got a taxiway over to the runway. Of course, you know, ice is never, it's not an ice rink, okay? It's rough. And these guys, it shows this picture. These guys who've been working for months on this plane, they are just sitting back in like patio chairs, lounge chairs, you know, beach chairs, and they're just watching all that work, man. They're watching that thing. Can you imagine what it's going to be like to watch that thing lift off the ground and the gear come up? I'll bet you we'd have heard them yell. So they're watching it, and it's, you know, bumping out over the ice, and it gets out to the end of the runway, and it stops. They go, okay, they're doing a safety check. Well, they're there an awful long time. And then all of a sudden, one of the cockpit windows opens up, and smoke begins to billow out of that cockpit window. And then another window opens up. Then they see the doors open, and these guys all bail out of it, brother. They get out of it. They had an emergency generator running, or, you know, generator in the tail of the plane, and somebody had put a gas can above it. And when it was taxiing out, it fell off the shelf onto that emergency generator and burst into flame. And after millions of dollars, about 5 months of work, these guys sat there and watched that plane burn to cinders. All that was left, you had this burnt fuselage with the wings and the tail, and when the ice melted, it's underwater now. That's vain. You imagine that kind of labor? That's vain. What you do is not vain. What we do, it is not vain. I was talking to the guys about street preaching today. You never know who hears something at this moment in a home somewhere around here. Somebody may be pondering what they heard on a street corner today. You understand? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. I was telling the guys, this buddy of mine, he's got a truck stop ministry. Did I tell you about him? Did I tell you about the guy? Okay. And so he goes to a lot of truck stops, and he passes a lot of tracks. And he said one day there's a big black truck driver walking a ways. He's heading out. And God said, go ask him if he wants to get saved today. Now, how would you like to open a witness like that? And he goes, Lord, I can't say that. He said, I'll go give him a tract. A witness. He said, go ask him if he wants to get saved today. So he starts over, I'll be up there in 5 minutes. And he steps in front of this guy, and this guy don't like being stopped. He kind of stops, and he's two big old hands turned into fists. He's like this, and he goes, are you a truck driver? Yes. Would you like to get saved today? And he said the guy started crying and said, yes, I would. My wife's been working on me for 20 years, and fell on his knees and trusted Jesus Christ right there. See, here's the problem. When God tells you to do something like that, you think it's stupid. What you don't understand is God's already worked on the other end. And that wife had been plowing that field for 20 years. What do you think it was like when he went home and said, honey, you ain't going to believe what happened today? Your labor is not in vain in the Lord. I worked in a hobby store many years ago. Not bad. And I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's hobby, but we'd have these guys come in, and they would build HO railroads, and they would turn a basement this size, the whole thing. You're never getting out of there. They would put thousands. The real guys, they wouldn't buy pieces of track. They would buy the rails. We sold the rails separate. We sold the thing that looked like a bunch of raw matchsticks, wooden matchsticks, and they would cut them to the right size and stain them, every one of them. Then we would sell them ballast, like little stones, and they would lay the ballast and put the things down and put this. Man, when I see that, I think, what could you do with your time and your money? And then you die. And your wife says, I don't want to do that stupid thing in the basement. You understand? But every track you pass is not in vain. I was telling the guys today, we had a street preaching ministry when I was youth director down in Massillon. And in a bad winter, I can't go down. It tears my neck up. And so I had one of my workers in my class. He was in charge. And they went down one winter's day, downtown Massillon, and the snow was blowing sideways. And it was bitter cold. And it was him, and only 3 guys showed up. And they couldn't preach because they got up and said, the Bible's that. And their words froze and fell to the sidewalk and shattered. And there's nobody there. You could have fired a shotgun on the street. Nobody could hit anybody. So how sometimes these businesses, they'll have this door recessed, like for more window. So he said, we're back here. The wind is blowing. There's nobody there. You can't preach. Nobody to give a tract to. He said, I said, we're going home. And he said, this guy comes by. And I thought, here's his words. He goes, a pigeon. And he said, I called him in my office. He said, I began to witness to him. This guy says, wait a minute. He reached in his jacket pocket and pulled out a pink and gray Simple Plan of Salvation tract from the Massillon Baptist Temple. That was us. And this thing looked like it's 100 years old. He said, you got anything to do with this? He goes, yeah, that's us. Where'd you get that? He said, I got it here last week. That guy had read that tract so many times. He had portions of it memorized and had wore that tract out. And they led him to Christ. I'm going to ask you a question. You answer it to yourself. You know the answer. Now, I don't know how you count success, but you're going to heaven, right? When you get there, is there going to be one person that'll hug your neck and say, thanks for telling me about Jesus Christ? Thanks for leading me to Christ. Let me tell you about this guy. I pastored in upstate New York, and we needed a sweeper for our church. And there's a little one-man sweeper shop. So I went down there. This guy that ran this thing was named Bob Borzing, and Bob was acid tongue. He was, New Yorkers, you know how they are? What time is it? What do you care? That's a New Yorker. And I go in there, and when he finds out, he was sarcastic. When he found out I was a preacher, he went into afterburn. Now, I don't know if you know this, but I can be sarcastic. And we're in a little sweeper shop about this size, and we're like 2 little terrier dogs. I bought the sweeper. I wasn't upset. So I bought the sweeper. And then every now and then I'd go down there, and he had like a window in the wall at the back, maybe about the size of that, where he had his workshop over there. We repair it. And as soon as I'd walk in, he'd go, what do you need now, preacher? And this is the truth. I said, I don't need anything, Bob. I said, sweeper's running great. Well, what are you here for? I just want to see what new stupid thing you believe. because this guy believed some stupid stuff. And he had a great inventory. And so we'd be standing at this one. I won. He got saved. He told me later, I know it, but he said there's another independent Baptist church in town, and the guy that pastored was like 6'4" and a big burly guy. And he said that guy walked in my shop and he thought, I'm in trouble. And he said, he looks at me and goes, cream puff. He said, I chewed him up and spit him out. He said, and then God sent me Sam Gibb. So when we left to go back into evangelism, Christmas came and he sent us a Christmas card. When he got saved, he was divorced. His divorced wife got saved and they got remarried. They had a son and a daughter. They got saved. He lived 50 miles away from Auburn, and there was a Bible-believing church there. He got baptized, got in that church, became a steady guy, and even preached in a nursing home. And so he writes me and he tells me how his wife was doing and how his kids were doing and the great message the preacher preached. He said, the best part, though, is that after Sunday morning service, I got to go to the nursing home and preach to lost people. And he's telling me all this stuff. And then he signs off. But before he signs off, he wrote one more sentence. You know what it said? And thank you for winning me to Christ. Will you ever hear those words? Because if you don't ever hear those words, you're majoring on a minor somewhere here. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your effort. Brother, you want somebody there, okay? I'm going to tell you something. If you've never won a soul to Christ, again, you guys, I don't try to intimidate you out. Because you hate souls. You don't love people. No, I'm going to tell you, if you never won anybody, I'll tell you two things to do. Number one, ask God for an easy. Say, can he do that? He'll give you a kid. I had won a soul for a while. Now I was preaching at a meeting in Canada, and this 10-year-old boy during the invitation, he went out, and this lady comes and says, he needs to talk to you. And I said, what? And he said, I knew you'd come here this year. And he said, I want to get saved, but I wanted you to lead me to Christ. So ask God for an easy one. And the second thing, find somebody to go soul winning and go with him. I mean, let them tell you how to do it. Help them, okay? Or let them help you. But you want somebody to hug your neck when you get there and say, thanks for winning me to Christ. Nothing else counts. The fish on the wall doesn't count. The rack doesn't count. The golf strokes don't count. Nothing counts. You understand? It's how many people you got there. And I'm sorry if you're bummed. And I'm sorry if you don't like what you've been watching. And I know, it's kind of been nice since Trump got in. But, man, it could be over tomorrow. They could get a bullet to him and brother, we'll be in a civil war. So he just said it. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Why don't you stay with your heads bowed? We labor under disadvantages. We have advantages that the Apostle Paul would be baffled by. Cell phones and TV cameras and internet, web pages. But we labor under some disadvantages that he would understand. I mean, even he saw him and heard him. We haven't. Maybe you're a little bummed. Maybe you're a little down, depressed, frustrated, whatever the case may be. I know we're not supposed to be stubborn, but when it says unmovable, that's just kind of sounds like it. And if you want to be stubborn about not quitting. Be stubborn. I might be talking to somebody, you used to pass gospel tracts, but you don't anymore. Well, you can grab someone on the way out tonight. Maybe you used to go winning souls, and you don't anymore. Get back on it. Maybe you used to teach in Sunday school, and you don't anymore. Your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Father, I ask you to be with these people, God. I pray, God, that their labor will not be in vain. If it's not in vain, it's your labor. It's for you. And Lord, if they've been kind of got distracted by the world and what they've been trying to achieve, isn't going to mean a thing 5 seconds after the rapture, then help them turn their heart away from it. And I know God, you know, they've seen what I talked about. They might not have classified it like I did, but we've never seen you, never heard you, never touched you. We're not watching revival spring up. Even now, God, with what a good conservative president's doing, we're not experiencing revival. I really thank God, a bunch of college students swinging and swaying and singing about Jesus. I don't know if that's revival. We'll never see 5,000 saved. We'll never see 3,000 saved. God, even our own children don't want to endure sound doctrine. There's probably somebody here, they just feel like walking out the door, not coming back. They're not evil. They're beat down, God. I'm asking you, Father, please get it in their heart that they would be steadfast and unmovable and always abound in work for you. And when they get on the other side, they're going to look back to the day they wanted to quit and decided to keep going. And they'll think that's the second greatest day of their life, right after the day they got saved. So God, I pray, Father, somebody needs to get back on the trail, back on the horse, back knocking on doors, passing out tracts, teaching kids, whatever the case may be, God. Let them do it tonight. Because if you come next week, we've only got so many days to do something for you. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Preacher.